So let's just kick this off. We talk a lot about regionalism. I want to ask you, and if you can answer this in very simple, crisp language, why is this important to you and your jurisdiction? Is it important that we even have this conversation? I'm going to start with you, Mayor Gray.
Well, first of all, Alex, I think it is important that we have the conversation because our interests converge so much. I'm not sure that they always are in concert with one another. I think, especially when you talk about economic development, there's probably inherent competition associated with that. You know, when there are companies that are thinking about moving to this area, or there are specific endeavors like technology, which the District of Columbia now is rapidly moving more into. We know Virginia has done a great job over the years with that. Maryland has done a great job. So there will probably be areas where we would compete with one another. But I think the ability to look even at those areas and find ways in which coming together would create opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available to us will serve us all well. You know, a lot of us work together in COG. I worked very closely with, for example, with Jerry and with Bill in COG. And as good as COG is in terms of bringing people together, I'm not sure we've maximized the opportunity. I was thinking back, you know, in my short time as mayor, if I've actually sat down with my colleagues here and said, all right, let's figure out a regional plan around economic development. And I don't think we have. And maybe that would be one of the things that might be crystallized coming out of this discussion.
Regional cooperation is generally an unsung and non-sexy kind of activity, and yet it is essential to the region functioning as a region. We actually do have, I would cite Metro as an astounding success of regional cooperation in setting fares, in managing it, in getting it built, in operating it, in reinvesting it in terms of capital investment, in seeking federal support for it. That has been a regional success story. Doesn't mean it's without problems, but it's an extraordinary feat. And we did it in 30 years and established the second highest transit ridership in the United States. Now, New York had about 100 years on us. So it's not a trivial accomplishment. And it was a regional accomplishment. Ozone days, you know, managing air quality. I remember 40 years ago when I first moved to Washington, we had these, thermal inversion days where you were advised, whatever you do, don't go outside because, you know, it's pretty unhealthy. We brought those way down, and we did it through a structure of regional cooperation in terms of what signal we would send to businesses, to citizens, to commuters, depending on the air quality day. And we have made enormous progress in trying to get our region into attainment with the EPA. That required absolute regional cooperation. It required cross-jurisdictional sacrifice, a little bit of giving up autonomy. We did it. When I was chairman of COG, we had utter chaos in this region on drought management. Every jurisdiction decided what it was going to do about drought. Some said, eat, drink, and be merry, there is no drought. Others, like Maryland, took it over and forestalled both Prince George's and Montgomery from responding, and decided on a state policy that there was a maximum drought. Whatever you do, don't drink water, don't feed the cat or dog, and don't wash your car. In my jurisdiction at that time, I had 3 different water authorities who had 3 different responses to the same drought. And so I felt that we needed a regional response so that that chaos ended. We had one definition of what constituted drought and what the response would be. And that may sound easy, but it's not so easy. It took a year, but we got it done. For the first time in the history of the region, we have a comprehensive regional approach to drought that I hope means the state of Maryland and the state of Virginia, and, you know, stay out of it. We will decide here as a region how we manage our water resources, especially in extremis. And you can repeat emergency planning. After 9/11, we were hard hit. We had deaths. We had tragedy. The largest single terrorist attack in terms of deaths in the history of the United States was right here, except for the World Trade Center that same day. And that gets overlooked. But the trauma to our region was real. And it affected every aspect of our life in terms of congestion, in terms of school management, in terms of escape routes, in terms of early release from federal government, in terms of the response of local governments. We came together as a region and we hammered together the first regional emergency preparedness plan, and that plan is still working. It won a national award. It was one of the first comprehensive such plans in the country, and it drives our investments as a region in terms of law enforcement and safety responses and so forth, and it is still working. So a lot of this is unsung. The work is done in committees. It never hits the headlines unless something goes wrong. But there's a lot right with this region, and there's a lot of cooperation. And I do want to say one thing. I'm sitting next to Vincent Gray. I've been here a long time. I've worked with every mayor of Washington since I've been here. He is the first and only mayor who actually really meant it about regionalism, rolled up his sleeves, got involved, participated in our work like everybody else. And I hope in this conversation we might even hear a little from Vince about how that helped inform him in his duties as mayor.
Thank you.
Again, as the Vice Chairman of COG, which is an association that advocates for regionalism on part of all of us here in the D.C. metropolitan area, we have for a long time been dealing with a lot of the regional issues, and more recently, part of our Economy Forward initiative, we're focusing a lot more in terms of moving forward with economic development and how we can get everybody in the region to be cooperative in that regard. But when we talk about regionalism, I think what's also important, what we fail to realize, is that there's competitiveness between our local jurisdictions each and every day for attracting new businesses and where people live and so forth, new residents coming in. But that's okay, but our real competition is not amongst ourselves, it's other regional organizations like in Los Angeles, like maybe in London, or other places around the world. And because of that, that's why we need to be in sync in terms of addressing and meeting our needs as a region. And those regional issues cover a variety of spectrum, which has already been mentioned. But as in transportation is certainly probably the one key element that needs to continue to be addressed on a regional basis. I serve also not only as a board member at Metro, but on 3 or 4 different other transit and transportation bodies throughout this area. But with our focus on economic development and the fact that we need to make certain that we have a very well trained and educated workforce, that we provide all the resources available for our businesses to have the opportunity to grow and expand, that we can't continue to do it in a vacuum. The old saying, adage that high tides raise all boats, that's true. But for the most part, in this region, a lot of us have been sort of doing it solo and meeting with success. But as I say to folks, my citizens all the time, Alexandria has achieved an awful lot. Each of our jurisdictions we've achieved a lot. But why not share the best practices? Let's work together so that, for instance, I'm very pleased and proud of the fact that I had no homicides in 2012, and other people and mayors around the country saying, well, how did you achieve that? Well, just because, thank you. It just didn't happen. We had to work at it, and my friend Vershawn and I, we've had conversation about this in terms of programs that we are doing in Alexandria that maybe best practices we can share with others. So it's very important that regionalism is on the radar, but more importantly, it's not so much that it's done by the local elected officials and governments. It has to be a collaborative partnership that includes the business community.
Because we're all elected to represent our individual jurisdictions. We're all represented in a way that, as the mayor has just indicated, provides some level of competition. So where we start this intellectual question of, do we agree that there should be regionalism, we have to define what that means. If it means that we have to all agree, then we'll never achieve that. Does it mean that we have rules that are fair, procedures that we can all agree upon? That's true. Because at the end of the day, for example, there would only be one FBI headquarters. It would either stay in the district or to go to either Maryland or Virginia.
I was promised we were not going to talk about that.
I promise you we will be getting to that.
Let me rephrase that.
Crisply, okay.
When it comes to Maryland,
And hell freezes over.
well, I think
we all believe in regional cooperation.
Move on.
I think my point has been amply illustrated. That we all, and I think it's a good point for us to start there, because there was a question raised today by Bob McCartney who said, it's time for us to cooperate and seize the opportunity. It is time for us to seize the opportunity. But the opportunity in cooperation means, as I indicated before, not that we agree, that we will have rules that are fair, that we understand the value for the entire region, and that we're working cooperatively to get that together. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it is wrong for us to end up in places where we differ.
Sure.
Yeah.
The difference, of course, is there are some fundamental differences, and you have to be mindful of those comparisons. When people talk about Atlanta, Chicago, LA, for example, for the most part, you're talking about one major city in one state. We are talking here that is the international capital, basically of the world, in my opinion, with 3 separate jurisdictions, with 3 separate bodies that have local jurisdictions that are overseen in many ways by a federal government. So to compare cooperation in this vein with some other communities, I think is not an appropriate comparison. But I do believe that there are areas we can work together.
My colleagues have all stated how important regionalism is. And just to Ike's point, you know, my good friend, I repeat this everywhere, my good friend Wayne Curry calls Washington, D.C. Rome.
You're a hero.
And in many ways it is.
Thank you.
And we're all surrounded by the nation's capital, and it really is the economic hub. So the rest of us feed off of that. So we need Washington, D.C. to do well. But in order for us to compete with the rest of the United States, we as a region have to do well. And I think we understand that. Are we going to be competitive with each other? Sure. But in the end, if Montgomery County gets a new building there, a new business there, people from Prince George's County get to work there. If the district grows, people from Prince George's County get to work there. Fairfax County, Alexandria, we like Alexandria to come over and actually spend money at National Harbor because it helps our economy, so we're glad they're there. But it is, we're all tied together. I think the big issue for us as a region is what are the things that will help us grow? What are the things that we can agree on? Certainly transportation is important for all of us. Healthcare. You know, we can't solve the issues of healthcare in Prince George's County unless the district can solve the issues of healthcare in the District of Columbia or Montgomery County and Alexandria, because we're so close. Our populations go back and forth. Education. Certainly we're looking at what are going on in changes in all of the region. Fairfax County has just picked a new superintendent of schools. Certainly we're paying attention to what they're doing there. So I think it's the areas that we can agree on in big policy issues that help us be competitive with the rest of the nation. So yes, it's important as a region that we cooperate.
Thank you. I want to turn to some questions around economic development. And this is going to be very difficult for each of you because I want to specifically ask about the FBI. And I want to ask you first, if you had to choose a location for the FBI that was not your own jurisdiction, where would be the best place for that to be? Okay, Congressman Connolly, you've given your answer, and I just need the location of it. I promised you, County Executive Baker, that I would ask you the next question first.
I get that one first, huh? Does Greenbelt include, is that in Prince George's County?
The Montgomery County section of Greenbelt?
You know, Montgomery County sounds well. Let me just answer it this way. I think I think anywhere in this region would be better than having it in West Virginia. How about that?
Mr. Leggett?
I think the first question would be a presumption that the FBI has made a decision that it's looking at options, and first they almost have to consider the district. So believing and understanding that they've looked at options beyond the District of Columbia, I believe that Greenbelt provides the best opportunity based on the factors that they've outlined. Proximity to job locations, proximity to transit, proximity to large workforces, and all of those things that they've outlined. I think that would be the case. Now, I've looked at that very clearly, and obviously if I had to select another jurisdiction, assuming that they've made a decision that they are looking beyond the District of Columbia, I think the Greenbelt site would be an excellent one.
Yeah, we'll use the U.S. Patent and Trademark Headquarters as an example. And that was one that was a very competitive process, and all of us had various sites available that we offered up. And through the meeting the criteria and the qualifications, they chose to come to Alexandria because, again, for all the reasons, being accessible to the Beltway, transit, everything else. And we're pleased to have them. And I think, again, when we talk about regionalism, we need to be working, in terms of working together, we need to focus on, where these agencies or entities go that best benefits the entire region. So bottom line, if it's going to leave Washington, D.C., then let it go to Fairfax County.
Okay. Congressman Connolly, you've answered this question, so I'm going to move over to Mayor Gray.
Actually, we had a hearing.
I guess you're going to answer the question.
We had a hearing, and one of the congressmen from West Virginia said humorously that he thought it had a lot of advantages after hearing Maryland, D.C., and Virginia testify about the various positive attributes of our respective jurisdictions. Obviously, I am a Virginia congressman. I'm the former chairman of Fairfax County, and I think there are some very ideal sites in Northern Virginia. SA site in Springfield and the CIT near Loudon, Fairfax, by the airport, both of which will be. I do think, however, having said that, the FBI is going to be an asset for the region, and I would hope that the decision that GSA ultimately makes takes cognizance of our transit infrastructure. That's really critical. But transportation really is a big issue. The BRAC process was very disruptive to this region and took no cognizance of transit location, and in fact upended it. It took roughly 22,000 people who were near transit locations to go to work and moved them to areas that were not. And that was an unwelcome development from a regional point of view, and ignored the enormous investments we've made in infrastructure. And it was not a very rational process. So I would hope that whatever we do, whatever location ultimately gets the FBI, that it's in sync with our transportation grid.
Mayor Gray, I'm going to twist the question a little bit differently for you, if you don't mind. If you don't mind. Will the city be aggressively pursuing the FBI?
Yeah.
Or have you just given up on it?
No, we've had a very serious proposal that's on the table, and we are working as hard as we can to try to preserve the presence of the FBI in the city. One of the upsides for us is, irrespective of where it lands up, it creates an enormous economic development opportunity in terms of where it is now, opening up to develop that part of Pennsylvania Avenue. So, one, we're excited about that opportunity, but we're also excited about keeping the FBI in the city. And the other question you asked, where would I like it to be? I would say in Prince George's County, given the following caveats. First of all, that would have to follow immediately upon us annexing Prince George's County as Ward 9.
Does that mean I get to be
I knew this would be very easy for me to follow.
And then secondly, given the outstanding working relationship that County Executive Baker and I have had, I would be happy to cooperate with them in moving to Prince George's County if they would give us our football team back.
Seems fair.
Somehow I knew he was going to.
But there's Prince George's County has National Harbor. They're going to have this $500 million casino that's going to open up. I'm not sure.
Yes, we will.
I'm not sure you want the FBI to be right in your backyard with the
So,
And who said regional corporations hard?
That's right, Jerry.
So we held a forum a number of months ago with the regional economic development directors for many of your counties and jurisdictions, or at least some of them. How would you imagine your views as the chief executive of your community? How do you think your views may be different from their answers? Yes.
From our economic development?
Yes.
Hopefully not any different.
Do you think that they, okay, let me rephrase my question.
Because you're about to get some people who will have new jobs tomorrow.
Let me rephrase the question. The regional economic development directors presented themselves as being fairly competitive with one another.
Right.
And that they, and that is what you pay them for, is to represent your jurisdiction and attract it. Do you think it's okay for your economic development directors to be poaching companies and organizations from other parts of our region?
I'll answer that because I've been involved in being on chairman of Alexandria Economic Development Board for several years until we reorganized it prior to becoming mayor, and now for mayor almost 10 years. I think, you know, it's all about leadership, and leadership starts with the folks that are the elected officials, the top folks that make the, you know, that provide the leadership and advocacy for their respective governments. But it has to be a collaborative partnership, working hand in glove with your economic development folks. And when they're out marketing and trying to attract businesses, everything, it should be representative of what the local government really wants and what the needs are. So poaching is probably not something that we want to be doing, but while at the same time, because again we're in this competitive region, you certainly would want to know when businesses are looking to relocate and be part of that process so that you can offer up your local jurisdiction as a place for them to come. But again, if we connect all the dots, and when I say connect the dots, from COG to Chesapeake Crescent, which I'm a member of, to the 2030 group, to the Board of Trade, to all the local regional chamber of commerces, I think it shouldn't matter, to be very blunt with you, because if we're all working together in terms of trying to grow this region, we're all going to benefit as a result.
I think yes and no. Yes, if the companies have indicated an interest that they are interested in other opportunities. No, if the companies are stable and you're simply going in to basically poach in a way that I think is unacceptable. But keep in mind, though, that the earlier question that you raised in terms of the economic development directives, the challenge for us is not so much local as it is with the state. There may be a disconnect between our local economic development directives, local government,
And we should be in a position where we can say for the future, this is how this asset, this tremendous asset, is going to be secured and funded.
County Executive?
I was going to actually let County Executive Leggett speak on this, because one of the things that he's done, and the reason we were able to move this forward is there is economic growth happening in the Washington region, and why having regional transportation and dedicated fund is important to the entire state, because that's our biggest issue, is getting them to understand that we're not an island up here and the rest of the state is out there somewhere else, and this is just something that only benefits us, and so that's our big charge down there.
I think he's covered it, so we go up to
Let me turn to a question from the audience that I think is on everyone's mind. How could we leverage our collective strength and influence to alleviate the effects of sequestration and future budget cuts on the region?
first of all, it's not just a regional problem. And if we look at it solely as a regional problem, I'm not sure that we'll get the success that we want. It is a national problem because the rest of the communities may look at this as though it is a regional problem here, and to the degree that they are harmed, it's harmed only to this area. We need to make certain that that message of our sequestration harms everyone from Texas to California to New York, as well as the Washington region. So we need to engage in a national campaign with that, recognizing that as we overturn and try to change some of that, our region would benefit. But you cannot address this solely as a Washington regional problem. Otherwise, the rest of the nation will simply turn its back on it.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree.
I couldn't agree more. I think, but I do think that we have to do a better job in detailing the narrative of the consequences, not only here but all around the country. They are real. Right now, maybe we went from exaggerating them to understating them, but the consequences are very real and cumulatively are going to be very apparent.
Many folks look at our patterns of development in the region and dream about better coordination of land use planning and zoning. Is that a dream or is it possible?
I'm trying to get that just in Prince George's County. I mean, it would be helpful and nice to be able to do that. I don't know if we can bring it about because of the governance structure throughout our region. But if you look at both the District of Columbia and the growth that we see there, what we're trying to do in this government is to coordinate our development around what they're doing and trying to just marry ourselves to it. You know, H Street, U Street, Rhode Island Avenue, the things that they're doing in the district, we want to tie that together. Same thing in Montgomery County. If you look at the work we're doing around Langley Park in the northern part of our county, and Montgomery County, what they're doing, we're trying to tie together. But it'd be great to have a policy that treated development the same way residents do. They go back and forth and to do that, but I don't know if it could ever happen.
But I think what happens, though, within the region is, and I tell my citizens this all the time, if we, in terms of the development that's whether it's taking place in Prince George's County, Montgomery County, the district, what have you, if we don't do things to be competitive, then we're going to lose out. And so all the more reason why, you know, we're spurring economic development throughout the city, east, northwest, and south, and in the central portion, even in Old Town, for the very reason that we're in this competitive region, and if we don't do some of the things to stay up or keep up with the Joneses, we'll lose out and we'll be behind, and then, you know, impact our education system, our transportation system, everything else.
I think one of the problems in our region, candidly, is that we confuse the ideal with the real. I remember a few years ago, there was an exercise, huge exercise here at downtown, a smart growth exercise where we were going to put our chits. Yeah, we each got chips, right? Remember that? Yep. And we were going to put them where we thought growth should be given infrastructure. And they all went, you know, in D.C. and Prince George's. And I thought, well, that's interesting because all the growth projected is in Northern Virginia. For the last 20 years, the lion's share of job growth is in Northern Virginia, and for the next 20 years, even more. I mean, way disproportionate to even our population. So the fact of the matter is the growth in jobs is going where the infrastructure is anemic relative to D.C. and Prince George's and Montgomery. And so if we can try to balance that out with new investments in infrastructure in where the jobs are going and in encouraging rational growth and development around existing infrastructure, that's sort of the ideal, but it's much easier to say that than it is to accomplish it.
So is that your way of suggesting that the FBI should be on a metro station in Prince George's County?
Yes.
I talked about rational growth.
You know, I saw a piece of research recently where it says, where the conclusion was we have in the district about 11% of the population in the region, but we have 50 to 55% of what is defined as the affordable housing stock in the region. We would love to participate in a region-wide effort to an even greater extent than what Jerry was talking about. In the budget that I just submitted to the council 10 days ago, that is our #1 initiative. we are proposing to invest $100 million in affordable housing, recognizing, frankly, that is just the beginning. And if we don't solve this problem on a regional level, all we'll do is just simply move people around from one area to another, which to some extent happens. And unfortunately, some of the rhetoric is not so positive around some of the people who are in need of affordable housing.
Some success. We've provided over the last 5 years nearly $300 million for affordable housing. And we've either constructed and maintained somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 affordable housing units. Nonetheless, we still have a problem in the county. But that problem cannot be resolved unless we all are working cooperatively and ensure that we all do our equal share, because affordable housing needs to be where the transportation links are, where the job opportunities are. Otherwise, it would not work. You cannot have one or two jurisdictions assuming the role without everybody participating. Otherwise, you would get great disparities, as the mayor's indicated.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. That, I mean, you talk about a question that needs, you know, an honest answer and a hard answer is how do you provide affordable housing throughout the region without the policy that we currently have, and that is it goes where the, you know, if the district housing stock goes up and it's too much, then of course the neighbor gets it, and it's usually, you know, Prince George's County or some parts of Montgomery County, when really the issue has to be around affordable workforce housing in the region. Because if we all don't take it together and sit down and say, okay, how do we make sure that it's almost like the, you know, when they had escalation when they were doing the nuclear bombs. So if the district, you know, just really starts developing and they go sky high, and Fairfax County goes sky high, Montgomery County goes sky high, and Prince George's County then says, whoa, well, we've got to build up because everybody, you know, affordable housing then becomes low-income housing. So then we try to build up, and then the workforce housing gets further and further out, away from the transportation that they need to get to work. And so without a serious conversation of what we do in a region to make sure there's balance, we're gonna have an issue.
But I think we'll also have to be, as a region, be thinking out of the box, because you can't address affordable housing just by doing it the old-fashioned way. You have to do it in terms of, you know, the types of housing products and municipal facilities that we're constructing throughout the region, and maybe try to put some of those both workforce and affordable housing units incorporated in those projects. Like in Alexandria, when we built our first fire station in 30-some years, about 4 years ago, I advocated for, you know, workforce and affordable housing units on top of the new fire station. So we have 64 units built on a brand new, you know, a $10 million fire station, and it's working, and folks love it. And but the other side of the equation is the fact that, you know, we, as a region, we need to get our partners, the private sector, the developers and property owners, to also understand the need for affordable housing, that we can't just do it as a locality. We need to be doing it in partnership.
Alex, if I could just add, you know, there are things you can do. When I became chairman, I made affordable housing my top priority out of six agenda items I wanted to pursue. We dedicated a penny on the tax rate for the first time in the history of the county. We'd never dedicated a penny for any purpose. And that pumped $24 million a year into affordable housing. We purchased, at the height of the bubble, when prices were the highest, 2,400 affordable housing units that we purchased and we preserved. We changed our ordinance to raise the level of affordable dwelling units that were required for developments over 50. And most of those measures are still in place. And we actually reversed where we were headed in terms of loss of affordable housing. And we also address homelessness. And by the way, I think Fairfax remains the only jurisdiction that has seen a significant drop in its homeless population, in large part because of those measures. So you can do it. I think in the suburbs you have to sell it more as an economic issue than a moral issue. But we understood at the end of the day that we were in trouble in terms of other things we cared about if we couldn't put people closer to where they worked.
Turn a question. You've got an audience of a couple of hundred business leaders here this morning, and regionalism doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not something just for government leaders to be managing for us. If you had to ask, how can the private sector help and become a bigger supporter for our regional efforts? What kind of role do you see the private sector playing?
I'll start. I think it's really important to know that all politicians, all elected officials, the term we prefer, who are successful have to be Pavlovian at a fundamental level. What is rewarded and what is punished? Not what you say you think is important, but what do you do? And the truth of the matter is, regionalism, actually practicing regional cooperation, has almost no reward to it. The business community doesn't really reward it. The media doesn't pay much attention to it. And your own voters can be skeptical if it seems to distract you from your day-to-day duties. I just take the media.
Jerry, I am at the microphone.
I know. with the one notable exception, of course, of the Washington Journal. I was actually going to pick on one of your rivals. I have run for and been elected to office 9 consecutive times. I was interviewed and endorsed by the Washington Post, thank God, in all of those 9 elections. Now, I have been the head of COG. I've been the head of the Emergency Preparedness Council twice. I was the head of NVTC and NVRC. I was the head of the Virginia Association of Counties and everything in between. I have never once in an endorsement interview ever, looking at my record, been asked about my regional activity. Now, what that tells a politician is you can say whatever you want, you don't prize it. It doesn't matter. It won't count. And for me, that didn't matter because I actually believe in regionalism and I know and I have seen the benefits of it. But I just warn you, a word of caution at the end of this session, unless we as a business community really mean it and reward it, it will remain hard to do.
Thank you.
I think that it would be a great assistance of the business community to expand its influence beyond simply the business community. There are large numbers of employees that you have. There are large numbers of other entities that you can cooperate with. So there's a collective effort and will to get a large number of people working with the public officials to promote regionalism. If we're simply talking to each other, i.e. the business community and nobody else, then this starts almost from the ground up because most people only believe it in terms of an intellectual concept. But promoting it at other levels with other organizations, I think gets the attention of a large number of people that ultimately can result in some changes. But we simply cannot do that talking to each other. It has to expand much beyond the current audience.
Yeah, if I could just add on to what County Executive Leggett said. You know, before I finish as county executive, I would love it if some business came to me and said, you know what, they're on Kenilworth Avenue, 295, the district's on this side, Prince George's County's on this side, great opportunity to do economic development together. We want to propose to the district and to Prince George's County a development plan for here, which includes all the stuff we're doing. I mean, from the business community coming to us and saying that, or in Montgomery County and Prince George's County. I mean, just really, that right there would say, not in competition with each other, but we understand the workforce is coming from the region. That's where the business community can come in and can help us, or reward us around, we talked about workforce housing or affordable housing. Having the business community come in and say, we know that we have to get our workers back and forth, and we're going to reward you as a region for working together, depending on where we locate and where we spend our dollars.
Mayor Grant?
I want to agree with what County Executive Baker has said. I agree. If we can find ways to cooperate, and it doesn't just happen in that sense. It doesn't have to just be about business. Also, I'm thinking we're in a situation now where we're both I'm trying to preserve a hospital, which is on the Prince George's County line. They're trying to develop a new hospital approach. And trying to think through, are there ways...
I'm trying to keep hospitals from fighting each other.
And I'm trying to think through, as in my budget this year, I've got, a commitment of 2 years of funding for a change agent at the hospital, but we've got the first $20 million in it to build a new hospital. Does it make sense that he's building a hospital and they're investing Prince George's County resources, we're investing District of Columbia resources, when in fact the hospital in the district is positioned to be able to serve people who are in Prince George's County? Now, that given, I think everybody would say, absolutely, you guys ought to get together. But then how do you make that happen?
Right.
You know, we all get enmeshed in our own priorities every day. And how do we get to a point then where we say there really is mutual benefit in us working on a hospital, since we're both about to invest in doing that in our respective jurisdictions?
I think the mayor is absolutely right. I mean, you look, and I talked about hospitals in the northern part of our county. It's the same in Prince George's County, Montgomery County. So how do we work together to make sure around health care and other issues? I think that's where the business community and the community at large could help us bring it to the table, because our constituency in our individual areas will say, well, no, we want a hospital for ourselves, or we want to just spend our money here, when in fact you're actually going back and forth. So we should be working together on those issues.
And we have a catalytic agent now, and that is the Affordable Care Act, you know, which now for the first time we will have universal, you know, health care coverage nationally. It will have an impact, obviously, in Prince George's County, a similar impact in the District of Columbia. So how do we take the catalytic effect of that and turn it into something concrete, of concrete benefit to both of our jurisdictions? You know, it's a take-home for both of us, and we ought to, I hope we don't come back to this discussion next year and say, what happened to that issue we were talking?
You bet.
Good.
Well, I know our elected officials have a very busy schedule. I want to thank you, first of all, for being here this morning, and I want to tell you that the Washington Business Journal is engaged in a year-long project exploring these issues of regionalism. You'll be reading a lot more about it, seeing a lot more about that. I want to introduce, for our close, the CEO of the D.C. Chamber, Barbara Lang.
So when you leave here today, continue the conversation with your colleagues. Ask yourself, what role do I play in making Greater Washington a united economic front? And how can I foster cooperation and understanding across our local borders? Before all of our elected leaders leave, I would like to ask them and to challenge them to look beyond the politics. Yeah, we know that's what gets you elected, but look and do what's in the best interest of the people and of this region. Again, thanks so much for coming today. We look forward to making this an annual event. Is that right, Alex? And on behalf of the Washington Business Journal and the D.C. Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for being here today. Good day.